Some properties that show really well and they're marketed properly, they're going to do better than others. We're still seeing properties that are listed on the market, but it's more just kind of testing the market. So the pictures, they're not the greatest pictures, for example. They're not staged properly, right? So you can kind of see that the effort is not there, and they, as a result of that, don't attract the highest offer, right?
And it's interesting because people's affordability hasn't changed, right? Like even... And when we talk interest rates too, there's always got to be the caveat of we're talking about not fixed rates, right?
So I think that's why it's really important to set the right expectations with the client that you're working with, whether you're buying or selling. And that's actually gonna have a reflection on the market overall. And what I mean by that is, let me give you an example. If you're working with a buyer as a client and they're not really interested in the property, or you don't think that the price is where it should be, you're most of the time better off not putting an offer on that property.
Right. Welcome to the Little Did You Know podcast. We're here with Sergio Muresan, who is a Toronto realtor, a runner, car guy, father, all around great guy. He drops a lot of gems, insights into the market, what's going on in Toronto. Stay tuned. Sergio.
Yes.
So there have been a lot of changes in real estate recently, both in Canada and the US, things happening in the US that may affect Canada, but even in particular here in Canada and Ontario. So we were talking off camera about expectations, right? And so I think setting expectations both on the buyer and seller side are going to be extremely important moving forward. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so really good point. We're going to see a lot of changes in the coming months and just the future. Basically, one of the main topics and areas of discussion around that is commission, right? So a lot of people feel that agents make a lot in commission, and there has to be more of a disclosure and process kind of just a process to kind of guide the whole expectation of who's really paying the commission, what are you getting for that service, right? For the money. So going forward, at the moment, actually, the commission is disclosed in the listing agreement. It says that the sellers are willing to provide a commission of up to, or whatever that amount is, whether it's 5%, 2.5%, that amount is disclosed up front, right? So with buyers and buyers agents, we have access to seeing what that commission is and what's being offered by the seller.
Right.
Okay. So going forward, with the proposed changes, they're basically looking at taking that commission off the listing so that we don't have access to seeing what it is.
And this is what's happening in the US, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. And so nobody knows, I guess we'll have to see. It's all so fresh. We don't know if that's going to come this way, but there's definitely the potential for it.
Yeah.
And in terms of setting that expectation with a buyer, the standard, and this is for just, any potential buyers or sellers out there who may not know exactly how it works. The way it's set up now is the seller pays the seller pays the listing brokerage. The listing brokerage generally pays the buying brokerage. Yeah. And that there's no standard, there's no set, but the kind of general commission, at least in Toronto, is 5%, 4% in other cities. And then within a buyer agreement that they have with their agent, it'll outline that if a seller is not offering cooperating commission to the buyer brokerage, then they'll be responsible for it. So it is there already. Yeah. But I think it probably gets glossed over a lot now because it's just the fairly regular practice that the seller will pay the lister. So the buyer or the seller will pay the buying brokerage. So the buyer, very rarely, unless you're, maybe buying off market or something like that, would actually have to pay their agent commission. Yeah. That might change.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. So I think just more conversations are going to have to happen with the buyers, with the buyer's agent and the buyers, and say, this is a commission that we're being offered by the seller, and if there's no commission or if the number doesn't work out, we still have a fiduciary duty towards and responsibility towards the buyer, so we have to do what's right for them. We would still have to obviously show the property and make sure it's the right fit, but then it's just a matter of who's offering the commission. Right.
And so we're currently, nearing the end of March here, 2024. What are you seeing happen in the market here in Toronto and the GTA?
Yeah, a lot of excitement, a lot of buzz, just from both ends of the transaction, so buyers and sellers. Basically, there's a lot of driving forces to the economy and just the market in general. On the buy side of things, there's a lot of pent-up demand. We're having a lot of clients go through the pre-approval process again to see how much they can qualify for and kind of get ready for that spring market.
Right.
We know that sales activity is up, so we have more transactions now than we did, especially in Q4, because it's been a little bit slower with the winter months. So we are seeing activity pick up. On the seller side of things, so when working with the sellers, they are looking at the reason why they have to move. Are they getting the price that they want, setting that expectation with them? Because a lot of times many sellers have been waiting for the right time.
Right.
They didn't want to sell maybe 3-4 months ago. They were getting the higher mortgage payments, but now maybe their mortgage is up for renewal, right? So now they're looking at their overall finances and taking a really good hard look at their overall, just finances and what the next step is.
And are you seeing still elements of still lingering from like the craziness of 2022 where sellers have these expectations of, well, I know my neighbor sold for X amount, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. That's what I want. Is that still that stubbornness, do you think?
Not so much.
No,
not so much. Not in Toronto, but we are seeing multiple offers.
Yeah.
So that's we're in a bit of a price discovery stage. Whereas in December, January, we can look at comps and say that sold for $1 million. We should get close to that.
Yeah.
But now we're basically, we're not exactly entirely sure what to expect because some properties get more traction, they have more offers, right? So it's just marketing that property correctly to the right audience and getting the right buyers to come see it.
Right, and it's very property specific or demographic specific because it's not everything's getting multiple offers. Although things are heating up, quite like in different segments that surprised at. There was the article about 85 offers on the Mississauga Semi. And so an entry-level home like that is going to get a lot of attention, right? 85 is crazy, and it was purposely priced well below at the 2017 price, basically, and sold approximately for market value. So the headlines are like, sometimes throw people, but
it can be misleading for sure. But I think, like you said, it's property specific. So in a freehold specific, so semi-detached and detached, anything under $1 million in the GTA, it's getting a lot of eyeballs, and that's because buyers, especially first-time buyers that have less than 20% down payment, it's just that entry-level house into a freehold, right? So there's more buyers, whether they're maybe downsizers, investors, or first-time buyers, kind of coming together.
But it's also happening. I have a client, looking in the 1.3 to 1.5, maybe even up to 1.7 range, and like they're getting multiple offers too. They're getting 12 offers, 15 offers, and they're selling well over asking. So it probably wasn't the case 2 months ago. No,
right?
exactly. So we've definitely seen an uptick. And it's funny is like just at the hint of interest rate drops, people seem to have flooded back into the market, which is something I don't want to toot my own horn, but I've been saying, even though there was mixed reviews on whether or not that would happen. A lot of people said, look, like that's, that's not going to necessarily flood the market again, but it seems to be doing just that. And we haven't even seen a rate drop yet.
Right. So seasonality speaks to that as well, because we know in the spring, there's the pent-up demand from over the winter. So now school might be almost done, or you buy now, you close when school's done with the kids to kind of make a move. So there's definitely the buyers entering the market, but I think they're also realizing that the value is there now because the rates are still high. So if you're waiting another 6 months, there's talks of interest rates coming down again. We don't know for sure, maybe as early as June, July, possibly. So that might be a little bit too late because the pent-up demand that we're seeing.
100%. I mean, I bought a house about a month ago because I was like, this is a very small window before things get crazy again. And we were still in a multiple offer situation, but only one other offer. So I was like, I'm going to take action now because we've been hemming and hawing for a while, and I could see the writing on the wall for craziness to come back. And I don't think we're going to see the same increases that we saw in 2022, but I think we're going to see prices increase. And it's interesting because people's affordability hasn't changed, right? Like even, and when we talk interest rates too, there's always got to be the caveat of we're talking about not fixed rates, right? Fixed rate, the bond market is
right,
those have come down.
Yeah.
But that isn't that's not what's making headlines, and that's not necessarily what's driving people's action when they see these headlines.
Yes.
So I don't know where I'm going with this, but
I do.
Yeah.
So here's I guess what you're trying to say. From an affordability standpoint, we know that the last rate hikes were in June, July of last year. Since then, we've had rates kind of be held. Okay, there's no increases, and that's the bank's overnight rate, Bank of Canada, and which drives the variable rates. Not the fixed, because that's correlated to the bond market, like you said, right? So if you work out the math, basically we know that a $100,000 mortgage is roughly about $500 in mortgage payment a month.
Right.
Okay. The average home price in the GTA is 1.1 million at the moment. Okay. So, and that would be about $4,500, $4,700, I think, a month in monthly mortgage payments. So if we have interest rates come down by 1%, okay, then that purchasing power increases by $100,000, which is $500. Because 1% in interest rates, that's $500 a month in mortgage payments. Right. So I think basically if rates come down by 1%, from just an affordability standpoint, somebody that can get in and buy a house for the average price at 1.1 will now be able to afford 1.2.
Right.
And the only factor that changed is the interest rates.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So it could be a quick and easy jump in pricing that we're going to see, and that's just based off that.
Yeah, and I think there is a lot of, because there's so much talk around this, but not the everyday person doesn't necessarily understand kind of the correlation between those things. So I think it's good to bring up often and kind of clarify. And that's another thing that I think I have that conversation around with potential buyers, who are, there's a lot of people say, well, I'm still waiting for rates to come down.
Yeah.
But,
why?
why? Exactly.
What does that mean to you, right?
Yeah.
Is it just, you got to have that conversation, kind of dive a little bit deeper to peel back.
For sure.
And see what's, the driving force behind that.
Right. Because a lot of people are waiting for that exact same thing. So, do you want to be in that group of people that are going to jump in once that happens? Yeah. And so, so showings are definitely up. Offers are up. Are we seeing more listings?
We are. So listings are also up as well. Different reasons altogether, but some of the conversations that I had recently is around mortgage renewals, right? So mortgages coming from maturity, either I would say from May to about November, December. So it's a matter of, do I sell now, try to get some money for the property now, or wait till October, November when rates might actually be down at that point and see if we can get a little bit more, right? But it's all relative, because depending on what the goals are, essentially the buyer, actually the seller might want to buy another property. So if you sell now, you might have that entry point before rates go down to kind of buy something at a good price point.
Right. Yeah. And that's another thing as well, right? Is you can't time the market on either side. So if you're selling in a hot market, you're buying in a hard market, and vice versa. So it's like low inventory has been one of the biggest factors that's been, putting pressure on prices over the last few years. So it's good to hear that we're seeing more listings come up, and I think in spring we will see more. But is it going to be enough to really feed the demand that's out there?
Yeah, that's a good question. So basically we have about 2 months of inventory right now. So that's 2 months of inventory is the absorption rate. So if there's no new properties coming to market now, in 2 months, all the properties are going to be sold. Right. Technically that puts us in a seller's market. However, in Toronto specifically, because we're accustomed to less than 2 months, we feel like it's more of a, I would say almost a balanced market. Right. It gives both buyers and sellers to kind of work hard and try to get the best value for their dollar, right? Some properties that show really well and they're marketed properly, they're going to do better than others. We're still seeing properties that are listed on the market, but it's more just kind of testing the market. So the pictures, they're not the greatest pictures, for example. They're not staged properly, right? So you can kind of see that the effort is not there, and they, as a result of that, don't attract the highest offer, right? Yeah, and come on. And then it's not going to sell, and then they relist it. Yeah. So it's a whole... But when you, I see these listed at 1.5, 1.6, and you used a cell phone, and I can see your reflection in the mirror. This has been going on for a long time, but I mean, come on,
I think we can do better.
We can do better. We have to do better.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think with so much going on around, back to kind of what we were talking about, what's happening in the US and what's happening with changes with TRESA in Canada as well. Realtors don't always have the best reputation. And I think that it's not reflective of most.
Right.
There are some, I'll choose my words here, but not the most detail-oriented realtors out there. There's also some lazy people. I mean, it's reflective of society, right? You're going to have different variations of like dedication to your work and to your craft. But it's not reflective of everyone. I think most realtors that you probably speak to are doing their job, right? And so I think it doesn't take that much to really stand out and become a little bit better than most. But I think, we have a lot of work to do to just improve our reputation in general.
Yeah. That's very important. And like everything else, some agents are in it for the wrong reasons, right? Yeah. They just want to close the next deal, get a paycheck, kind of move on, and never talk to the buyer or seller again, which is not right. It's a relationship business, and if you want to have longevity and success, you gotta work hard for it, and earn and build that trust, right?
And it's not right, but it's also it's just bad for you. It's bad business, right? Because it's good for people who are willing to build that relationship, build that trust, and continue on. Because they're gonna have those repeat customers.
A lot of times, so on the listing side, when I list the property, sometimes I'll see offers that don't make sense, and right away I know, because I've worked with buyers, I understand that their relationship is not solid, the buyer's agent and their client, just based on the offer that they bring to the table and the way the other agent communicates, right? Sometimes I feel a frustration on the other agent, because maybe they've submitted multiple offers, and the buyer just can't see the value in the property, so they want to put in a lower offer than what the property's worth, things like that, right? So I think that's why it's really important to set the right expectations with the client that you're working with, whether you're buying or selling, and that's actually gonna have a reflection on the market overall. And what I mean by that is, let me give you an example. Let's say there's an offer date on a property where the seller wants to review all the offers as they come in, right? If you're working with a buyer as a client, and they're not really interested in the property, or you don't think that the price is where it should be, you're most of the time better off not putting an offer on that property.
Right.
Because if you do, you might be, if there's only 2 offers, you might be that third offer kind of coming in, right? And it's blind bidding. So the other offers that came in that are actually serious, they're not going to know. They just know that they're competing against somebody else that came in last minute. Right. So now you can have a situation where a property that's worth maybe $750 is going to sell for $775 because you came in as that competing offer last minute, right? So in a way, when you do that, you're not doing yourself and your buyer a favor, because that property sold at $775.
You're setting your next comp.
So you're setting your next comp, right? So now you're chasing where it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, right? Very true. And then we have the whole thing, whether or not this was real or not, the scam. Scam offers. I've heard a lot of people talk about it. I heard people call it out as, I don't believe it, it's fake, which is the only reason why I say I wonder if it's real. And for those who haven't heard, there is potentially a realtor, or maybe multiple, maybe this is a thing, paying people to submit fake offers on their listings, or to just to drive the price up, right? Drive the amount of offers and drive the hype around it. So obviously, again, not a good look.
It's not. It's really not a good look. And that's just one incident that got exposed, on social media, and just kind of made a big splash. But I think this has been going on behind closed doors for a while. I've been in situations representing clients where it's Sunday, you look on the calendar to see how many appointments and showings the property had. There's nothing all weekend, right? And then we put an offer at 7 p.m. All of a sudden, there's another offer that comes in.
Right.
So, you gotta kind of have that conversation with the listing agent and ask the right questions. Who's bringing the offer? Is it somebody from the same office? Things like that, right?
Well, and if in that scenario, and you suspect that, you don't have to. But you don't have to go in crazy then. You can go in where you were going to go in, because the other one's not even real.
Exactly.
But that's, that's not going to be the case. Most people are going to be like, oh no, we have to, and you seem like a very data-driven person in general, but it's really hard not to get emotional in these situations as a buyer.
Absolutely. So we have to stay neutral. We have to represent our clients and do what's best for them. We kind of have to guide them and be there for them emotionally. They can let it out on me, for example, but I can't go and take that same energy to the other agent, right? So sometimes, I'll have to kind of come back to center after having a difficult conversation with my clients. And then, eventually it's just, finding the right words to kind of drive the needle forward and, make a deal happen.
And so you talked about, certain realtors getting into the business for the wrong reasons. What got you into the business?
Yeah. So my background is in finance. I worked at 2 big banks in financial planning, financial advisory roles, wealth management. I've done the mortgage side of things. So I've personally funded over $150 million in secured lending. So HELOCs, mortgages, things like that.
So you understand that side of it as well?
Very well. Yeah. So basically, I've always liked real estate and I had a passion for it. I was investing in real estate while working at the banks. And I've had some mentors along the way that were doing the burst strategy, which, funny enough, I was doing their mortgage at the bank and they would come to me for, options on how to kind of set up the right products to structure them for that next purchase.
Okay.
And then I realized that, it's real estate is not only passion, but it's like I can see myself in that career path and not feel like it's work, because having a 9-to-5, there's no real flexibility, and after doing it for almost a decade, I said it's time to kind of explore that. The driving kind of force behind it was also I wanted more flexibility because my wife and I had a baby. I took some time off, and I figured, okay, this is my starting line. This is where I should go into real estate, explore it. And worst case scenario, I figured, okay, if real estate doesn't work out for me, I can go back to the bank. I was on a parental leave of absence.
Okay.
And if it works out,
there you go. Yeah. That's smart.
Yeah. So if it works out, I'm just gonna, continue doing real estate.
Yeah. It's funny. I remember reading, I had my daughter because mine's, I think, similar ages. Mine's two at Christmas. So I remember having her in my arm reading, I think it was People Money Deal.
OPM?
Money People Deal by Stefan Arnio.
Yes.
And I'm pretty sure it was that, if I remember right. And it said, don't start a business and a family at the same time. And I was like, well, too late. I just started real estate. I got a baby in my arms. But
I read the same book on my walk with the stroller. And it said,
So how do you balance, family and work? And
it's great. It's like having a family and doing what I was doing before being at the bank. I wouldn't be able to do it.
Right.
I would come home and I can just see myself not be happy in the career. That's kind of, it's just very numbers, data driven, and come home and spend whatever little time I have with the family.
You don't have the flexibility.
Exactly. And with real estate, I set my own hours. I set the right expectations. I book my calendar. I have family time. I have work time. And I think it's important to have that skill set as an agent, because if not, it's just going to be up in the air. It's going to be chaotic, right? So you got to take the time that you need for yourself and your family and kind of make it work.
Very true.
Now, with that being said, I work late. My showings, yesterday I had showings till 9 o'clock, right? So, but in the morning I can spend the extra time with my little guy and kind of take him to daycare and things like that.
Yeah, that's great. And so, was it a big transition for you to get into real estate and get into the more the entrepreneur, setting your own schedule, that whole thing?
Yeah. It was. I think one of the biggest lessons along the way was having to work in your business, but also on your business, in the back end of things, right? The things that you don't see on Instagram, right? So that was huge, and I realized that those are the activities that are going to drive the business forward, right? So it's like an iceberg. It's what you put in at the bottom and then you see the top, right? So you really have to kind of grow your business and see it as a business and connect yourself with the right people, have the right partners. Not every conversation is going to be a buyer consultation, right? There's going to be, interviewing mortgage agents, right? Having conversation with stagers and home inspectors and things like that. So that was really interesting to me, because before it was, with the bank, it's just, here's what you have to do, kind of get it done. But I didn't have to worry about how everything else works and how to drive the business forward. It was just the task at hand.
Right. Right. And so you're an investor, you mentioned as well, and you also have a property management company?
Yeah. So I do property management as well. So my wife and I, we invest in real estate. We have a different strategy in the sense that we're diversified. I know some people like to stick to just one that works really well, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's just allocating your resources to the best way that makes sense for you as an investor and your family, right? So basically, I've done the BRRRR strategy. So duplex, up and down duplex. I've got a semi-detached as well, townhouse, and a couple condos. And pre-construction as well. So it's just kind of allocating those resources and testing the market.
Right.
I think as investors, we're chasing the highest return. So we have to kind of be open to different investment opportunities as they come along, right? Because what worked today might not work tomorrow. So you have to kind of pivot and adjust your strategy and be able to identify opportunities as they're presented.
Right, absolutely.
For example, I'll give you an example. So right now, there's a big opportunity and gap in pricing in condos.
Right. Yeah.
Especially in Toronto.
Yeah.
Right. So typically we're looking at a 2-to-1 ratio in terms of what a detached house is versus a condo. Toronto houses detached, they're at about 1.65, I believe. Average condos around 726. So there's that gap, right? Yeah. And sure, there's maintenance fees and things like that, but what a great way to get into the market and kind of build some equity, and grow a portfolio from there, right? Just
for sure, especially if for someone who may have been inclined to like a pre-construction, you can go buy an existing unit for much less now, and be on your way, right? And first-time homebuyers too, they don't necessarily understand the path to getting that dream house. They often think, well, I can't afford the house I want, or
Exactly.
But there's a path, right? You can start with a condo, you can move up to a townhouse, a semi, etc. So yeah, very, very, very.
Everyone
good.
has a different starting line, right? So don't look at your neighbor or your friends because you don't know what really goes on. I can tell you when I worked at the bank, I was doing mortgages. A lot of times there were gifts, family money, right, for different purposes and strategies in terms of allocating their resources. Again, just tax benefits, right? Instead of buying, for example, instead of as a parent buying a second property for yourself, you now buy it under your adult child as a principal residence. You're not paying capital gains tax on that when you sell it, right? So it's just things like that. But also just getting into the market and having the right expectation that you now, gone are the days when you get a good job, you finish school, you get a job in 6 months, you have a little bit of savings, and you're buying your dream detached house on a huge
the Canadian
lot.
Dream.
Right. So that was in the 70s, maybe.
Yeah.
But I mean, just the way things are going, and with immigration, right, and just everything else, like the cost of labor and lumber, material, construction, right. We're seeing pre-construction prices. They're very high compared to what the resale condo market is right now, for example. So there's that opportunity to get into the resale space.
Yeah, it's hard to say what the future of the pre-con world is going to be.
We need housing.
Yeah,
so
I know.
It's just a matter of, and there's different things that we can do better. I know the cost to builders, it doesn't make sense for builders to build because they're being squeezed for profit, right? They're for-profit organizations. They have to have a bottom line, right? So with the government, some of that money for the purchase price, a lot of it actually goes to the government for permits and taxes and things of that nature. So I think there's a lot we can do in the back end with policies, the way we bring new housing and inventory to market.
Right.
I know we're also seeing laneway suites become a thing.
Yeah, hopefully the cost can get down, because that's something I explored recently, and it just wasn't. It wasn't worth doing a detached like laneway suite, even with an existing structure. It just didn't make sense. It would make way more sense for me to get a home with, a basement or something that I can convert there instead. Yeah,
and that's what we're seeing. Just highest and best use, right? So a lot of times, and I tell my first time buyers, instead of buying a townhouse, maybe why don't you buy a detached that has the potential for a basement, legal basement suite, right? If you have the additional down payment or maybe money you can borrow from family or somebody else to kind of come in as a partner on that deal and you can live upstairs or you can live downstairs and rent the upstairs. So now, you're reducing your housing costs by having a supplemental income to support your affordability.
And I think that's the message, right? A lot of people, I think, get frustrated and they just assume I'll never be able to afford anything, and that's that mentality and those comments that we see all over social media are not helping, because there's options out there. You just have to be willing to explore them, talk to the right professionals and, be willing to not even sacrifice, but be willing to put a plan together and execute on that, right?
Yeah. So again, going back to expectations and just learning and educating yourself as much as possible. Because a lot of times, you're talking to agents, but if you don't know as a consumer what you're talking about and you don't know what to ask, you might not be able to identify that agent is not the right agent for you, right? Depending on what your goals are. There's a lot of agents that do a lot of leases. There's nothing wrong with that. There's agents that do a lot of listings on the listing side of things. There's nothing wrong with that, right? But you got to find an agent that kind of is willing to work for you and has the connections and the pillars in place to help you drive the results, right?
No, 100%. And you're not going to be the right fit for everybody, and I think that's a big part of it too. And that again touches on realtors' reputations, and finding one that is a good fit for you, I think is really important. And that's, I think, another message for consumers is to not just if you had a bad experience with one, you should be talking to multiple anyways when you're looking for someone to work with, and that's not going to be reflective of everyone. You need to find someone that's a good fit for you, that is on your side and knows the product that you're looking at. Yeah,
absolutely. And that's the same for mortgage agents and other professionals, sometimes even lawyers, right? And I like to be very engaged with my buyers, especially first-time buyers, because they don't know what they don't know, and it's my job to represent them, and I need to know everything about them, right? So I need to know not just what the pre-approved amount is, but how they came to that amount, right? And what I mean by that, to give you a more specific example, is sometimes they'll go to a bank, and I know this because I was on that bank side of things, and I've done the mortgage pre-approving clients, so I would see it all the time. And with that discovery conversation, they would say, well, here's my income, here's my documents, how much can I get approved for? It's not the same to say you can get approved or pre-approved for a $700,000 mortgage on a detached or a condo where there's maintenance fees, right? So you kind of have to factor that into the equation. So if I have a client that's telling me they're pre-approved for $700,000, I need to dig a little deeper. They might want to find a condo, but maybe they don't know that there's maintenance fees that need to be plugged into the equation for the total affordability of that mortgage, right?
And just because you're approved for $700 doesn't mean you should spend $700.
Or it doesn't mean the property is worth what it is. So don't get excited about that.
But especially if you're looking at a place with maintenance fees, those maintenance fees can and will go up, and so you need to make sure you have affordability in the future as well.
And just the lifestyle, right? A lot of times you'll have newlyweds and they're planning a family at the same time. So just kind of having that conversation again, and just making sure that financially they're going to be not, house rich, pocket poor, or whatever that term is.
House poor,
House poor,
no, exactly. It's very true. And we're seeing that with a lot of, people not being able to complete their mortgage responsibilities, right? And so that that's where some of the sales are coming from as well now. But it's unfortunate, and it can be avoided. And again, just speaking to the right people, I think is important for people.
Yeah. And I think it's really interesting to see how banks kind of stepped up throughout this difficult period with interest rates from static, just with the static variable payments, right? So with variable mortgages, the payments remain the same, but the interest went up. So now more of the payment goes to the interest. You're not really paying down the principal, right? But at the same time, as a homeowner, you're not feeling the additional cost out of pocket.
Although the banks are catching some heat right now as well for not the best practices in terms of what people should be doing with their money, but that's kind of it's a whole other.
A lot of changes. It's exciting. Yeah.
Canada has been just kind of existing in its own little bubble for a long time. I don't mean bubble in the sense of the Toronto housing market bubble, but just kind of it's finally kind of, things are catching up with itself, where we've been able to get away with a lot of things, I think, for a long time in a lot of segments. And yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting times in Canada.
Yeah, no, for sure. I also go to investor meetups and groups and things like that, just to kind of get an idea of what works for investors specifically, right? So the message is basically just looking at the numbers, obviously, and seeing what makes sense. And I find that there's great value outside the city for investors, Sudbury, Timmins. I'm sure you can speak to that as well. But even more so recently towards Windsor, London is still a great spot. We're seeing a lot of growth in Hamilton, right? And with transit, the GO station that's getting built, it's just connecting everything to the city.
Very true.
So, I think a lot of the pre-construction units that were sold a few years ago that are now coming to closing, right? There's a lot of struggle and pain in that market specifically.
A lot of incentives involved.
So, there's deals in that space as well. So I mentioned the condo market in Toronto specifically, the resale, but also in assignments, right?
It's funny. You might have to stretch yourself to be able to afford one of them, but then you get a Bentley with it. So
no gas card, but
it's crazy times. But I appreciate your insights today, and let people know where they can find you. We're going to link you down below, but let them know.
So I'm just on Instagram at Sergio_Muresan, and Facebook Sergio Muresan. Those are my main platforms.
And you can connect with other runners, because he's a big runner, a car guy, father, realtor, all that stuff. So you weren't part of those running clubs that were knocking people over, right?
No.
Okay, good to know.
No. I've actually got a marathon coming up May 5th.
Sweet.
So I'm doing my 4th marathon.
Nice.
And that's a Toronto Good Life. And I've signed up for a 50-kilometer trail race in May 25th. So back-to-back races, a lot of kilometers.
Wow.
It's good. It's
crazy.
Good. Yeah.
Cool, man. Well, good for you.
Thanks. I
appreciate your time.
Perfect. Thanks.
Thank you for joining the Little Did You Know podcast. Thank you to Sergio for joining us today. It was a great chat. Lots of insights, man. There's a lot going on in the Toronto real estate market. Reach out to him or reach out to myself, of course. And we'll see you on the next one.